Hi, everybody. This is Dennis. Today, you're going to be learning about student development theory, theories that focus on transitions from Schlossberg and Satir. I'm really excited about this. I really love this stuff. Transition theories, I think, play out a lot in our own personal lives, but definitely in the lives of students. And I hope to also use transition theory as a theoretical framework for my dissertations around transfer students way down the road. So I'm really excited. I hope you are too. We're going to get started. I have a script. I'm going to stick to the script and get through this. Transition theories, two major scholars, Nancy Schlossberg and Virginia Satir. Nancy is prominently known for her 1984 work on adult development and transitions, adults in transitions. Literally, that's the title, Adult in Transitions. She's a leader in counseling psychology, transitional studies, student development. Her theory provides insight into the factors related to navigating life's events and coping with change and transitions. Virginia Satir is a pioneer in family therapy research and scholarship. The model focuses on areas of therapeutic interventions, the intrapsychic, the interactive, and the family of origin. So definitely, I similarities that pop out for these two scholars. They're both counseling psychologists. They deal with adults and people really trying to help move through stages of life. If it's adulthood for adults, and also just families, it's important. Creating a family and being a part of a family unit is a really important transition for most, if not everybody. So definitely giving the tools and strategies to cope and navigate these avenues. An important therapy assumption that I want to point out is the problem is not the problem. Coping is the problem. Therefore, therapy focuses on improving one's coping instead of just solving one's problem. And so I thought that stood out to me because I think as student affairs professionals, we get in the habit of trying to solve student problems when we really should be helping students manage and cope with their problems or their situation. Some problems are never going to go away, but different strategies, different forms of support, different ways to manage situations, coping strategies, those are what we probably should be focusing on because we can't really solve everyone's problem. And so that stood out to me. And as you can see, again, the links between the two therapists, and actually these scholars, these theories aren't necessarily originally student development theories. These are family studies and therapy sessions that have thus been applied to other areas and aspects of student lives and other contexts as well. So hopefully you'll see this. We'll start with the Satir process. Her process assists people with making choices that raise self-esteem, provide self-accountability and responsibility, and become more congruent with self and others. There's about 7 stages to this process. The first 4: status quo, foreign element, chaos, and transformation. The status quo simply says that, I'm living my best life and everything is great. I don't intend on changing anything. Change is silly, or I've got into a routine. I don't really need to change or don't see a problem with this at all. A foreign element is introduced as a significant change that takes place on the birth of a child or getting a ticket for driving under influence. This disrupts the status quo from the outside. A new element's introduced. Chaos ensues. Life is difficult or not operating at the status quo that it used to. Feelings of riskiness, fearfulness, stress, and just the overall feeling that life is falling to pieces. My life is shattered. There's a lot of value and learning that comes from this stage because you feel like you're at your wits' end. Transformation happens as the depth of exploration, which means that a lot of learning and deep thinking happens, and a shift brings a person closer to the core self. So we've experienced the normal. A foreign element has been introduced. Chaos ensues, but it's that transformation time where the folks receive maybe this light bulb moment of how am I going to get out of this situation? Where is the transformation? Where's the learning? And how can I pick myself up and move on? Continuing on, integration, people become more comfortable with new feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. So maybe, just maybe, life isn't over. Maybe if I'm a little bit more open minded this way, or try something new, or just try to take steps to change my situation. Practice is the homework of integration, the actual physical, tangible takeaway of the outcome of the change process and putting it into practice. So, life is hard, life is a struggle, chaos ensues, transformation happens. I see my light bulb moment. What can I do? Oh, maybe I can, take a step through door A, or be more open to door B. I'll try door B for the sake of that analogy, and trying to practice and take new steps. Because of this practice, because of this integration, a new status quo is formed, having a new sense of control that takes place, which it isn't the previous status quo, but living a new normal, if that makes sense. So yeah, the list format, I think it works, but thanks to some great cartoon in the world of Pinterest, this kind of explains the satire process as well. Again, you have this guy, he's happy-go-lucky, all is well with the world, and then something happens. This foreign element, for example, a family member really gets sick, and this person has to care for them or to see after them. And this disrupts their whole normal. There's resistance, and life is definitely falling to pieces and hanging on for dear life. Oh, what do I do? What do I do down here? A transformative idea in terms of, hey, maybe I can manage all of this by working with my supervisors, faculty, or coworkers and family, really, to come up with a plan. This plan helps me see the light, and let me move forward, pick myself up, and a new status quo is kind of brought to light. It's not the old status quo, but it's definitely living a new normal, despite these changes in the process. I also say that it was hard to kind of contextualize this theory from satire, because this theory and this change process has been used in so many other contexts: family, relationships, businesses, organizations, change theories, change models. I think the chaos model is born out of this process. So it's used in a lot of other contexts, and as you can see, it definitely applies to student development theories. So a really great photo that kind of graphically puts it all together. And I would say yes. In other worlds, this is called the trend, the change curve. There's a curve here. Aspects of change, stages of change, the transition process, and more. So good job for satire. Moving on to Schlossberg, the transition theory. Schlossberg wanted to develop a framework that would facilitate an understanding of adults in transition and aid them in connecting to the help they needed to cope with ordinary and extraordinary process of living. This theory, student development theory, is viewed as psychosocial theory and expands on counseling, psychology, and theories and more. Helping adults transition through life circumstances and not assuming positive outcomes for all. This stood out to me again because not all transitions have like a fairy tale ending to them, just like the problem. If it's some problems, they're just not going to go away. And so we can't promise or assume that we can make good out of bad. We can definitely give students strategies for coping and managing, but we can't always have a picturesque ending at the end of the road. So that's something just to keep in mind. It's just a reality that, again, as student affairs professionals, I think we solve problems, but we can't always do that. But we can definitely help students move through. Independent variables for all you quantitative folks: the individual's perception, the characteristics of environments, the characteristics of the experience in the transition. These are all different variables that can be tested in this theory, that are definitely taken into consideration. Transitions defined as any event, non-event, that results in change relationships, routines, assumptions, and roles. It's important to understand the type, the context, and the impact of transitions. And then transitions also consist of a series of phases: moving in, moving through, and moving out. A good example or analogy here is probably moving in terms of a res hall situation at four-year universities. Residence assistance and residence life programs really help students move in to this college environment, and moving in and meeting strangers for the very first time. Those first few weeks are really just helping students cope with the transition to college, moving in, living with people, eating together, trying to build community, trying to make friends, and trying to make this a positive experience. Some moving out experiences, as we try to help our students, you see more interview type of career building, skill building, networking skills taking place towards the spring quarter. So as students get ready to graduate or move out of the college institution, they have some skills to take away with them. Usually that's kind of how it goes, but it's just a different colorful analogy there. Schlossberg's four S's. These are four major factors that influence a person's ability to cope with transitions: situations, self, support, and strategies. Situation is what triggered this transition. Is it a good time or a bad time for a transition? It's really hard to have transitions in the middle of the quarter when it's midterms coming up. It's not a really good time. And again, we don't plan for life events to happen. Is this a temporary situation or is this a permanent change? And how do students' past experience with change work into this? Self are those personal characteristics or traits that help, that come into play as a student is trying to move through the transitions, and really how they might handle situations. Their outlook, which is their psychological resources, their outlook, self-efficacy, are they a resilient student? Some aspects of spirituality might come into this if times are very difficult. Characteristics such as SES, gender, age, and stage of life as well come into play. Stage of life, if you're maybe an older student you've probably experienced a lot of life happening to you. Some things you can brush right off, and other things you just can't, depending on where you are in stage of life. Support is important because social support during these transitions are helpful. So relationships, friends, family, a community for social support. And then this actual strategies, the steps to actually do something about the change or the transition, solving, managing, and just changing this transition or this phase. What are the actual tangible to cope and move on? Some challenges, which the Schlossberg theory, it's applicable to almost anything, as you can see. It wasn't really intended for adult learners, but it applies to traditional age students and just anyone experiencing major transitionings. However, because the theory is so complex and there's multiple transition points and there's multiple independent variables, and it's really difficult to formally assess this theory. That means the validity of the research is sometimes questionable. More research is needed to confirm if the transition process is in fact the way that it's described. Essentially, everything is kind of contingent because there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different personality types, a lot of different variables. So it's really hard to really test and say without 100% that this theory is so effective. But you can see this theory has been applied in a lot of different spaces, outside of higher education, but into, therapy, adult situations, organizations, and more. So I think that's the challenge with theory and at least transition at this point. I think I've reached my limit. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned transitions and different stages of lives. They affect us all, not only as students, but as adults, as people, as humans going through this process that we call life. Thanks and have a great